You're listening to the Governors Podcast, which is hosted by school governors for school governors and for all involved in or impacted by education governance. On the Governors Podcast, we have open, honest, and transparent discussions about governance in the UK education sector, sharing and providing insights into the realities of entering the boardroom, sitting around the governing board table, and leaning in.
Hello, I'm Sharon Warmington and I support schools and academies as a governor, governance practitioner and a clerk. I'm also the founder of the National Black Governors Network, supporting the education sector in diversifying their governing boards.
And it's Olivia D. Hind here, an under 30, unapologetically black female who is changing the face and space of school governance.
And you're listening to the Governors Podcast. Okay, let's get into today's topic.
I think today we should get into some emails because we've received quite a few.
Yep.
And so there's two in particular we can pull out. One's a very short one and easy to address.
Okay.
And then the second one, I think we can kind of read it in full and then maybe that will provide food for our discussion today.
Okay.
So that's my thought. So what was the first one that you would like us to talk about?
The first one, and I know you've read this, so I know that you're not offended by it.
No, not anymore.
We got an email from a listener. Thank you very much to all our listeners who do send emails. We do read them and we just don't have the capacity to respond to them all. But one person said, and they were really, really clear about loving the podcast and not wanting to offend in any way, shape or form. Mm-hmm. And believe you me, we took it in that way. Mm-hmm. But politely asked if Olivia would sort of not interrupt Sharon as often as she does. So, Liv, do you want to pick that up?
As you can tell, I am a little quieter than I usually am because my personality type means I'm either one extreme or the next. When you first read an email like that, you almost hear it in your head as like, kindly do shut up.
Shut up. No, and it's really weird. It's really weird because we're so used to it.
Yeah, we bounce off each other.
Absolutely, and I think because we're also mother and daughter, it's the way we've always lived. Trust me, listeners, from the time Olivia came out of the womb, her mouth was going, and it hasn't stopped 30 years later. So, but. Even in the midst of it, and I recognize it's happening, I've never said to you, let me speak. Even though sometimes I want to say, let me speak. But I do understand that a lot of it is just, you've got, your brain is going so quickly. And I recognize that as being, and this may be generalizing, but something that I see often in millennials, people of your generation, that their brain is just so quick to respond to something before they've even heard the full question or the full statement. You want to come in. And so I don't take offense to it, but now I'll be able to say, Liv, remember the speaker, the listener, the listeners want to hear me as well. So...
And you know what it is as well? It's like, it's not intended to cut you off or anything like that. As you say, obviously you've been around me a long time as my mother. So we've often had this conversation even before we started the podcast, even just in our mother-daughter catch-ups and things like that. And it happens both ways.
Yeah,
like
it does.
You know, sometimes I'll be sitting and I'm like, okay, mom, make your point. Like, make your point because you've been talking a really long time. Like, or I'll say something and then you'll jump on it. And so I think it's only as I've more and more come into my own, you start to see it. And I'm able to tell you, as someone who's fed from you for a long time, someone who's inspired me, to say, you know, I am literally a mirror of you, because some of the things that you see or you experience of me, I've experienced of you for a long time. And probably the second thing I would mention about that is, in terms of not intending to cut you off, is because I recognize that being a purely audio podcast, so we're not a video podcast, so people can't see us. I feel like the acknowledgements of the points that you make, because some of my, let's use the word, interruptions may not necessarily be for me to make a point, but it may be a sign of agreement of something that you're saying, or a journey that you're on, and a point that you're making.
Almost underlining or emboldening.
Yes,
if it was written. Yeah.
Exactly. Or if someone was watching it, if you were watching a TV show or something like that, then it's a case of, you would see the person nod their head, or you'll see the person like acknowledge that they've heard what the current speaker has said and is in agreement. Whereas if someone's purely listening, it could be just me, but I think if I'm just purely listening to something and it's a two-way conversation and all I'm hearing is one voice and nothing, I see that as just dead engagement from the other person. So I think it's definitely a preference in listening and a style of speaking, in terms of like what you're used to. I get bored really quickly when I'm listening to things. So if something's not engaging and doesn't
are you saying I'm bored?
No. I'm not saying you. I'm just talking about the types of things I listen to could be different to the types of things someone else listens to. And so basically, our podcast, what may be considered an interruption by one person may not be. May be considered like, oh, they're bouncing off each other's energy, or it's enthusiastic, or they're really excited, they're really passionate and stuff like that. Whereas someone else may see it as, wow, she's really disruptive, and she's like, why won't she just let the other person do a complete speech on the point that they're making? So I think it's definitely a preference and a style. But what I will say, and I would probably finalize this point here, is that we do listen to our listeners, and we do appreciate the fact that you have listened that much that you've taken the time to contact us. And I am very appreciative of people who engage with us to that level, because it means that you've really digested, you've been careful or respectfully critical, or you've critiqued in a very polite way.
That's a classic example of being a critical friend.
Yes,
absolutely,
exactly.
I would say, because it's about improving the output,
of course.
So yeah, I appreciate that.
And I must admit, like, that point, since reading that email, or since you informing me of that that comment, it comes up in my mental space a lot, even in occasions when I'm not doing the podcast, I'm not preparing for one. It could be a team meeting I'm attending. It could be when I'm having conversations with family members or friends. Like, it's like,
you've become aware.
More aware. Yeah, it's almost like, not because I feel like I cannot be myself anymore, but it's more, I'm just a bit more conscious, not to box myself in, because I'm someone who doesn't believe that a box exists, but it's just a case of being more considerate of the other people, and just thinking, are there other people who think this, but they just haven't voiced it to me? So let me see if I maybe just need to breathe a bit more, and just probably just come across calmer or something, just rebalance, recalibrate.
It's a really interesting point, actually, because I've just gone through a series of LGB observations for the trust where I am, until the end of the month, I am head of governance. And one of the areas on the observation form that I created was listening and our governors speaking over each other. And in all the LGBs I visited, that didn't happen. And it's interesting that just talking about it now, I'm trying to think of situations in GB meetings where that has happened, and it has happened. I've seen it happen, and it can come across as, just always wanting to get your point across, not allowing other people to speak. And it can be a barrier for if we were in a bigger group, and I'm very aware of this when it's me and you with other people, because we have this relationship and understanding and communication, we can be quite overwhelming for a lot of people because, we're just constantly on it. And I think in those situations, we do sort of pull back slightly and become more aware. So things do change when you're in different situations and different circumstances. You adapt and you're flexible in those ways. But in this podcast, we will be as conscious as we can, but I've no doubt we may revert to type.
I was going to say, or keep the essence of who we are.
Absolutely. We'll never lose that.
And
we'll never lose that.
Something that I have been saying for a while now is that I truly believe in an ever evolving experience. So it means that it's not that you are changing the core of who you are. You just recognize that you are transforming, you are learning new things about yourself, and you are letting go of the things that no longer serve you. And so you're just being. I like the fact that you related our unofficial discussion topic to the boardroom space, because when I'm in spaces with a lot of people, if I'm not at the facilitator, I think it's also because I know I've been a facilitator. I know what it's like to deliver. And so you're constantly having to feed.
Yes.
You're constantly having to pour out. And I'm also someone who creates content on digital media. So therefore, you're literally talking to yourself. So you're used to just going and going. And this is why I say everyone's setup, everyone's landscape is different. And what one person views as one thing, another person can view that same thing as the complete opposite, because it depends on their energy. Some people are not confident speaking in front of a room of people. So when they're having a 2-way, 3-way conversation, they probably will just sit and listen because they're not confident to speak out. Whereas when you're a confident person, you then are thinking about how you are going to be received. So when I'm in those training sessions, I actually do find myself quieter, or I'm trying to give a more succinct response to in a Q&A situation. Or if I'm in a live room and there are other speakers, when you think about like panel members and you're one of the panel members, recognizing that on a panel, you're not a keynote speaker. So therefore you're there to make a point and leave
and shut up.
Exactly. So I think I think the environment also dictates the way you show up. And so, as you said at the beginning, because we have an established relationship, because most of the time it's just me and you, and because it's purely audio, I automatically go into my comfort zone of, this is someone who knows me. This is someone who knows that I'm not just trying to have my voice heard, because I'm not that personality type, but it's more a case of just kind of showing up in our energy as our full selves. So I definitely appreciate that email, that comment coming through, because it's given us something to really discuss. And for me personally, on this personal development journey that I'm on with everything that I do, to really open up my self-awareness to how others receive me in different spaces, and just allow myself to be more conscious of that without feeling like I need to cut off large chunks of my personality.
Who you are. Absolutely. And just going back to the governing board space as well, I've been in situations where I'd be absolutely bowled over for people to interrupt me, because and I'm thinking, when you're a chair always has to speak, always has to find a point that they can talk about on an item, when the rest of the governing board can be quite passive, and that can be a lonely place, and if you had somebody like you in the space, who always had something to say about everything, to me, that's a win-win. And again, I suppose that's why I just handle it, because I'm used to, as a trainer, being in a room and asking for feedback on a particular exercise, or ideas on this, or suggestions on that, and just having a wall of silence, which is very, very difficult to deal with, and have to carry and bring that energy all the time. So we're just two really, really energetic people. It's like two lionesses, going for it, and we just go for it. So
I hear that.
Absolutely.
I actually, just talking about you wanting someone to interrupt, to bring the energy. I remember years ago when I was at university, my closest university, or one of my closest university friends, he actually said to me, Liv, I like having you around because I never have to think about what to talk about. He's like, that is an amazing trait, an amazing quality to have. For him, who's really quiet compared to me, as I seem to attract very cool, calm, quiet people. Like, they seem to feed off my energy, and I don't feel depleted. But at the same time, I very rarely attract the same energy as me. Usually it's usually the balance. It's usually the opposite. But he was like, yeah, I don't have to, there's no awkward silences with you. And I was like, you know what? I think I'm going to take that as a compliment.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And in governing board spaces, it's important not to have awkward silences, because you imagine, as a member of SLT, or as the head teacher or the principal, delivering a report or something, and just being faced with silence. And I know that does happen. Yeah. That's really, really hard, which is why I say, again, going back to the LGB observations that I did, on a couple of them, my recommendations were that governors prepare in advance, because it's very evident if you're not prepared for the meeting. Prepare in advance, and for each item, think of one question to ask. Because believe it or not, it just helps the meeting just move along a lot smoother, a lot quicker, and it makes minuting it so much easier, because 100%. It feels like everybody's involved. And even if you don't get to ask your question, because if there are 4 or 5 questions, yours may well be asked, but the fact that you took the time to prepare means that you're engaged and you're listening, and you're ready with your question. And if your question's asked by somebody else, then you've also always got another question on another topic. And it just, for the senior leaders in a school, I know that is really important.
100% agree. And you made a point earlier about being the chair, and I am the chair of a committee. And so I always go into those meetings slightly differently to how I go into ones that I'm not chairing. Not to say I prepare less for the others, but there's something about being chair where you need to make sure that every paper that is prepared feels as if it has been read by someone. And so it's not to say that your board or the rest of your committee members are not as engaged, but I almost feel like if I was to put a football analogy in, seeing as though we're a football family, so that's what's come to me. I almost see the chair to some extent being the last line of defense. So if there's no one else who's going to comment, if there's no one else who's going to ask, at least the chair has to. So then it's at least been acknowledged.
that there has been something that has been looked at with a little bit more detail or with a keen eye to kind of bring into the discussion, so that when it's then minuted, it does show that the board is showing challenge and support for the work that the school's doing. And so it's very important to think about that. But then also, if you're not chair, and I think when you become chair, you start to show up in the meetings that you do not chair differently. Because then you know what it's like to be in the chair position and have to feel like you're going through everything with a fine-tooth comb, not to critique everything, but at least feel like you know what's going on in that space and what's going to be discussed. So then when you're not chair, you don't want that pressure to be on the chair
of a meeting that, I
exactly.
Get it.
So you try and show up in a way where it's like, okay, I'm not chairing this meeting, but how can I show up so that the chair doesn't feel like when they ask, does anyone have any questions? Does anyone have any comments? They don't feel like it's just crickets and they're the only one that is like, okay, I need to say something because I'm the last line of defense. So I definitely feel like, as well as people who are very engaged and very enthusiastic and very passionate, those are the adjectives I choose to use rather than very interruptive and very disruptive and all of that. As well as those people, I think it's also worth mentioning anyone who is extremely quiet to also step outside their comfort zone. So if the people who are always the ones that are vocal, always the ones that are active, are thinking about how they are being received and they are stepping outside their comfort zone by not pulling back, but trying to make sure that it's within a right measurement, then I think it should go on the opposite side. So it doesn't leave that everyone has to be less, but it's more of what you're not already showing up as. So then you can kind of really explore those different qualities that you can have one day. Like if you're not naturally confident, then just set yourself a target. I will ask a question in this meeting. Doesn't have to be for every item, but preparing for every item means that at least you can ask one.
The preparation to me is everything. That's where it sits. And so when I'm talking to clerks, I try and get them to be more focused on the agenda and make the agenda very clear. What's for information, what's for discussion, what's for decision, what's for action, so that as you become more experienced, you can hone in on those that are for discussion, because you can usually tell, because the agenda item is longer than, if you've got an agenda item that's 5 minutes, then there's not going to be much time for questions and discussion. But if you've got an agenda item that's an hour or half an hour or 20 minutes, then do you want to sit there and be spoken at for those 20 minutes, or do you want 10 minutes of the key points and then 10 minutes of open discussion and questions? You can usually tell those things, but you can only do that if you are preparing for these meetings.
Right. I think we should get into our sponsors before we get into the second email that we're going to acknowledge in this episode. So let's hear from Governor Hub.
Governor Hub is proud to support the Governor's podcast. As a leading provider of online governance support, we know that confident and well-equipped governors bring about positive and meaningful change. So when you've been inspired to do your best by really leaning in on the topics that matter, you can rely on us for the tools to help your board work better, the guidance and training to develop your skills, and a secure online body of evidence for when it matters most. Visit thehoot.news to join us and feel part of something bigger.
Okay, are you ready for the second email?
I think so. It's a bit of a mouthful, so bear with me.
Right.
So this came in March, in the middle of March, just to give people a bit of a timeline. Middle of March 2023. Dear Sharon and Olivia, firstly, can I just say how valuable I find your podcast? I regularly send snippets to other governors and our head or recommend them to listen. I've got a little behind. I'm on number 26. So you might already have addressed my query, in which case, apologies. We're just coming to the end of an extremely stressful time with our board. We are a small 84 pupils rural school in Suffolk, and our team has depleted over time such that I am the only parent governor with a chair who leaves this month, a vice chair, a vicar who has limited involvement, and another foundation governor that wishes to retire this year. In reality, once chair goes next week, there's me and our vice.
Wow.
We found ourselves without anyone prepared or able to take on chair from the 1st of April. Our vice was somewhat coerced into that role, so has no desire to do more. I work a very full job, so I feel time constrained. Mm-hmm. We have had 2 meetings with the local authority about what happens in 2 weeks' time. In short, they didn't know, made Vice and me feel utterly horrible and unvalued, and finally said the school would be put into RI, requires improvement, with special measures.
Wow.
I'm a pretty robust individual, but this was a truly horrific experience. With a massive effort and being pretty honest with people about the hole we are in, we've managed to find 2 new parent governors, as well as an additional governor who is a head elsewhere. I have said I will take on chair now that we have more bodies to share the workload. I'm continuing our recruitment activities, though as we frankly could do more with some more heads in the game. It's become incredibly, that's in capitals, important that our 3 new governors are inducted successfully and effectively. Here's where I'd appreciate your thoughts as to how best to do so. Our most recent recruit left within a month after, I suspect being overwhelmed with information. Maybe she wasn't right for the role in any case, but it's made me very mindful of how important the first weeks are for our new team members. Mm-hmm. If you've made it through this essay, thank you. Keep up your fantastic work. It's really impactful.
Wow. Well, there's a lot in there. Mm-hmm. And I suppose my response is going to have several parts, because there's several elements, and they're not in any particular order. And of course, you have permission to interrupt me.
Thank you.
In what I'm saying, and this isn't me sitting here saying that I'm going to solve all your solutions. One of the first thing I'd say is thank you for your letter, and well done on behalf of your school for continuing and not throwing in the towel and stepping into the role as chair, which can't be easy. I understand, working full time with a lot of commitments, that won't be easy, but thank you for doing that. And that's what our volunteers across the sector do. They sacrifice a lot in order to support their local schools. So secondly, I should say, I'm disappointed with the response by the local authority. They are not Ofsted, so they cannot tell you that you will be placed in RI, and requires improvement. Any Ofsted judgment is based on an inspection and not whether you've got a full governing body or not, because the reality is things happen and governors leave and join for various reasons. So that, I think, is a pretty poor show, that they've done that. And I won't even paint the whole local authority. That may just be one individual in that setting. Because you mention a vicar and foundation governors, you may be a church school, so you may want to have a conversation with your local diocese in terms of what help and support they can give in terms of inducting new governors, and also helping to retain existing governors, Because one of the things that happens when you join a new governing board, it is overwhelming, especially if you've not done it before. The information overload can be immense. And so what I say to anybody that I'm inducting is I explain to them that there will be information overload. I say to them that they don't have to understand everything. I say to them that we will hold their hand through it all. And I say to them, you will want to leave, but please don't. And I'm honest with that, because, you know, how many situations have we been in, whether it's a new job or a new situation, and we think, oh, I can't do this, I want to go. But we know that if we stick it out on the other side of that wall, that brick wall, we see the beauty or the success that we won't see if we walk away. So it's important that we, and I will always say, be honest. Be honest about the amount of meetings that are involved. Be honest about the amount of time to go into school to do your stakeholder engagements. You know, be honest, because what I also find is when people join, they're joining on the back of, and this happened to a clerk recently, joining on the back of saying, oh, there's only 4 meetings a year. And then when you're in, finding out that, you know, you've got exclusion panels and you've got complaints and you've got grievance and you've got Ofsted visits and you've got this and you've got that. And what you thought was, you know, a four meeting commitment turns into 12 meetings plus whole day governor visits or whatever. So be really honest. And at this time of year, as you're planning your calendars for the new academic year, do that as a group, as a team of governors, not just with the clerk and the chair and the head, but so the clerk, the chair and the head may propose dates based on, you know, making sure it doesn't clash with a school trip where everyone's out, or a parents' evening or whatever. But then when those dates are proposed to the governing board, ask them, you know, are these, the fact that we've chosen the first Tuesday at the beginning of each term, does that work for everybody? Do you know what I mean? Have those kind of honest conversations. These are little things, but they make a huge difference. Something else is check with an organisation like Governors for Schools.
Yes, of course.
You know, and not just, I would say, not just in terms of trying to find somebody, because I know in rural areas, and they mentioned that it's a rural school and 84 pupils, I would imagine that's a primary school.
Yeah.
So I understand the difficulties. And so even when you have organisations like Governors for Schools, they may not have on their website a governor in your area, but, you know, sending them an email and having a conversation with somebody may help them to support your need.
Of course. Yeah.
So I would definitely suggest that. I would also, again, if you are a faith-based school, find some local churches that may be outside of your own denomination. So of course I'm going to talk about the New Testament Church of God, because that's the one I'm used to. There's also Church of God of Prophecy. There's the Redeemed Christian Church. There's a lot of black-led churches. I don't know if they have any based in Suffolk, but they may do. And what you could do in that regard, in terms of recruitment, is agree that for the new academic year, you may decide to move all of your meetings to virtual so that you can spread your net a bit wider.
Oh, yeah, that's a good suggestion.
So if you don't have a committee structure, if you have a committee structure, you could say, okay, we'll have our governing board meetings in person, but we'll have our committee meetings virtually, right? And then so that new governor that lives outside of Suffolk would then only have to travel in 3 times a year or 4 times a year. If you don't have any committees, think about moving either all of your governing board meetings, except maybe the summer one, because Suffolk in the summer is really nice. You know, the sun is shining, it's lighter evenings, all of that. But have your autumn meetings online, because traveling at night, you know, it gets dark before 4 o'clock, and traveling at night isn't always easy for everybody. But seriously consider being flexible is what I'm saying. That's the point I'm making. Being flexible and thinking, what are you going to lose if you switch to virtual meetings for a year? We've done it. We did it in 2020.
That is so true.
We did it in 21, and for some, they still did it in 22. So we've done it. So for the sake of getting a strong and committed governing board, think about that as an option, I would say. And again, I've recommended that to other schools who are in a similar situation, because once you can remove the locality, the geographical barrier, then that opens you up. I know of a governing board where one of their governors literally lives in America.
Oh, I remember you telling me about this in a casual conversation.
Yeah, they live in America. Now they travel to the UK on business, and what that school have done is make sure that the meetings are organised to coincide with their visits to the UK, so that that individual governor can still attend those meetings. And within that visit, they do their stakeholder engagement, they do their training, they do the meeting. And you yourself, you live in Manchester, but your governing board is in Birmingham.
Yep. So any needs that my school has that trigger my school governor duties, I have to think about traveling into that city to make sure that I'm there, or to make sure I'm available so that I can then fulfill those roles and responsibilities. So,
and you make it very clear to any governor that lives outside of the local area that the school will cover their travel costs. We as governors, we talk about volunteering. Yes, that's volunteering your time. That doesn't mean that you should be detrimentally affected financially in fulfilling your duties as a volunteer. So many governors do not claim travel costs. They don't, and I understand that. But those who need to shouldn't feel uncomfortable about doing that. And I remember having the conversation with you about that by saying, you know, whilst you were living in Birmingham, even though you were getting Ubers, you didn't, you paid for that yourself.
Yeah.
But the moment you moved to Manchester, a train ticket,
it's no joke.
That's a different level. That's a different level of commitment. And not everybody is in a financial position where they could soak that up or recharge it to their company or anything like that.
And the thing is, I knew that would be a barrier for me to continuing to be a governor. Me moving to a different city, I would have still happily been a governor as long as my expenses, my travel expenses are covered. Otherwise, it's something that I would need to factor in. Is this a cost I can afford?
Yes.
And so I asked the school, I said, if you would still have me, I will happily stay as a governor, even though I'm no longer in the local area. Birmingham's still my home, but Manchester is now where I live. But the only thing I ask is that my any travel I do that I do in order to be present, those expenses incurred will be covered by the school, so that I can still fulfill my role. Otherwise, it's not an issue. Besides that, it's not an issue.
Absolutely. And so I think that schools, not just the one that we're talking about in rural Suffolk, schools should seriously think about that, because it can be a barrier. And I truly do understand, you know, budgets and all of that.
Of
but
course.
these are volunteers still. They are giving their time.
Yeah.
So facilitating that, making it as easy as possible to process claims and not have them wait 30, 60, 90 days for reimbursement, you know, making sure that it's an easy and straightforward process. That is a barrier that can be removed.
Because the barriers, if they're not at least discussed or considered,
Mm-hmm.
that financial implication on the volunteer means that even if they do attend meetings, they may not be able to attend all, because the way that they've budgeted for that month, it doesn't allow for them to travel. And so then that then affects the attendance of governors, or governors being present for important items. And especially if there isn't an alternative, like the school is also not open to hybrid meetings where if people can't travel, at least they can attend virtually, and everyone who can travel will be there. So it's really thinking about different things. We're not making it a money issue, because by the time you travel, the money's already left your account. Because so it's not like we're earning anything from that by claiming those expenses, but it's just something to at least think about. Is your school open to that? And we're not saying specific to this email, we're talking in general.
In general,
to anyone listening.
It does just open you. It removes those, as I say, those limitations geographically for you. And it just, if you're looking for somebody with a specialism or a specific experience or knowledge base, and they're not in your local area, then where else are you going to get them from? If you think about going onto LinkedIn and typing in the name of your school, if the name of your school hasn't changed in the last 20 years, then you may find former students who have moved out of the area and who have never thought about becoming a governor in the school that they started their education in. But they may live in Norfolk or somewhere else in another county, but they could become a governor in your school.
And just to add on to that point before you move on to the next one, is that what I do, as well as and this is now for the people who are governors who would like to request that that they can reclaim travel expenses to be able to attend meetings or attend the school, is thinking of really organizing your diary so that you're not costing the school more than you need to. So for example, I will only do school visits when I know I'm going to be in Birmingham. So if I'm traveling for a meeting that's taking place on a Wednesday, and I know that I'm available either the day before the evening of the meeting, or I'm available the day after or the day before, then that's when I will then do my visit. So it's just one train ticket, if that makes sense.
Yeah, you maximize it.
I maximize my visit to the school where I can. So so when the clerk will send the routine termly emails to all individual governors saying, okay, can you let me know your availability for when you can do your link governor visits, your school visits with the relevant leads inside the school, I would only give the dates where they are next to or the day of meetings, because it's only on the odd occurrence when the meeting is too far in the future and I need to do my visit a bit sooner as a subject link governor. But most of the time I try and compact my diary for when I'm there. So I'm traveling to the school and I tick off the meeting and I tick off so this is the committee meeting or LGB meeting, and then I also tick off a school visit with the EDI lead, and I tick off a subject link governor meeting as well. And so then I can leave and I can be like, okay, I've been in the school for the whole day or for 2 days straight, but at least I've been able to maximize that trip. So then it's only one expense I'm then claiming.
Yeah, that makes sense.
To and from.
Absolutely.
So that's the advice on the other side. So not just thinking
most people would do that as well. Most people would do that. That makes absolute sense. Something else would be what contacts could you possibly establish in the area with other organizations? I was recently speaking to one of my team members, actually, who focuses on governor recruitment, and saying to them, if you've got a contact or a way of getting into an organization, then maybe doing a short presentation, and by presentation I mean 20 minutes or something, on becoming a governor, so most of the time you'd think of the local authority, but there may be a bank, there may be a department store, there may be any number of organizations where you can make contact and just say to them, can I come in and speak to your staff about volunteering as a governor, and just having that conversation and breaking down some of those barriers, because we live in a world where people want connection, and that connection is either through video. So you could do a couple of YouTube videos and send them out if you wanted, or you could do live talks. If you've got a local library, I know libraries are, notoriously closing left, right, and centre, but something, a coffee morning, something, ask the head of the school if at the next parents' evening you can have a 10-minute slot to talk about becoming a governor. So, and not just targeting the parents, but talking to the parents about the networks and friends and colleagues that they may have, because networking is about knowing somebody who knows somebody who can help you, really. And so the point I'm making is raise the profile of what your school needs beyond sending out a newsletter or putting it on the website. And for the last 2 years, and again for next academic year, I will be delivering training to trainee teachers on behalf of the Suffolk and Norfolk School Initial Teacher Training Programme. And over the last 2 years, you'll know this, Liv, we've worked with about probably just shy of 200 new trainee teachers. The point I'm making is, if you can target some of those trainee teachers to become governors in schools, then that is a definite win-win.
Yes.
Because they will not only be new to the profession and finding their feet as teachers, as a governor in a school that they're not teaching in, they will also be able to see how a school is run holistically. And
it will work for their own professional development in the role.
Right. So you will be getting a benefit from them. The governing board will be getting a benefit from them in terms of bringing teaching and learning into the governance space. And, you've almost got a guaranteed chair for a teaching and learning committee then, and on the flip side, they will be gaining knowledge and information, and as you say, CPD in how a school is run. So if they're aspiring to leadership over their career, they want to become middle leaders or senior leaders, being a governor will help them. It will. So I hope the one thing I haven't mentioned, which I'll mention now, is last but definitely not least, is speak to your clerk. Your clerk or governance professional will have a view on this as well. So as the new chair, going back to the person who wrote the email to us, as a new chair, establish a strong professional relationship with your clerk. Talk to him or her about your vision for the governing board, and find out from them how they can help you and what they will do to support your vision. They are there for you, and they will have a view and opinions themselves, all with the aim of moving you and the school forward. So that's it in a nutshell.
No, that's brilliant. That's brilliant. So I think we should just go into takeaways, shall we?
Absolutely.
I think my takeaway from all of this episode's discussion is the power of listening. To say that a huge part of communication and knowing what you want and also knowing what other people in the space want is by really listening to the voices that are out there. And so I think it's really good to be able to know what different people's experiences are, but then also figure out how do you get to a solution, because I'd say a lot of that is governance centered. You have people from different walks of life who come into the same room, the same space, to have a shared vision, and they are focused on setting the strategic direction of a school. And so then it just makes me think more and more how embedded or integrated governance is in everyday life. You know, you are mingling with people all the time who come from different experiences, and whilst you may have different definitions of success, everyone's trying to live the best life that they can. And so that will look different for different people. And so sometimes you will really learn a lot more from just listening to others, because not because you are not sharing, but because you then know how you can slot in or how you can add value, and hear what other people are saying, so that you can then put a different spin in there. Back to when you were talking about preparing your questions for items. Like when you listen in that meeting, you will know whether a question you've prepared has been asked.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it sounds silly, but it's so important to know that. But then you can also know if you haven't contributed. If when you're listening, you don't hear yourself in that space, then it gives you pause for thought, and it says, okay, how can I contribute, but contribute even better based on your comparison against your own self, not against anyone else. So I definitely think the power of listening is important. And from the second email in particular, the one that was, you know, a real scenario that people are dealing with, it's like, okay, if you think about it, she's been a listener of our episodes, at least 26 she's listened to, and she's still here, and sharing and having issues. And it's knowing that I want to let this listener know you're not the only one in the space who has these issues. But the fact that you stood up and said, this is my issue, can someone help? That is the start. So when you said my first point is to say, well done, I echo that. And I just want this listener to know that you have been heard. And hopefully this episode may lead someone to you, or may lead you somewhere, so that they can be like, either I've got a similar situation, then let's try and figure out what strategies could work in our individual spaces, or it's a case of, oh, there was a nugget there that I can use. There's something I hadn't considered, because when you listen, you hear the other ideas that are open to you. So yeah, that's probably my takeaway. I hope, as always, I hope people listen to this episode and find something that hooks them. So thank you to all the listeners. Definitely appreciate you.
My takeaway is an offer. It's an offer to the person who emailed us. If you would like a complimentary session from me for you and your new governing board, virtually, because I know how long it will take to drive to Suffolk, virtually, to just spend, you know, a half an hour session with you on, you know, effective governance, as a way of supporting your new governing board in gelling together and moving forward, then I'd be absolutely delighted to deliver that. So do just get in touch in that regard.
I love that. Brilliant. I think I'll respond to this email and say, we will say that, so that she doesn't wait until she hears it. Because whoever the listener is, that even though we kept it anonymous with the name, they'll know their email.
Yeah, they'll know.
Know what they wrote. So, but that's really nice. So, yeah, that would be great.
Thanks for listening to today's episode. Please rate, review, and subscribe via your preferred streaming platform. The Governors Podcast is a brand of the legal entity Education Governance Solutions Limited and a free training resource for anyone. So if you know someone who is interested in becoming a governor or a trustee, please share this podcast with them. And if you'd like to get in touch with us directly with questions or comments, then drop us an email at thegovernorspodcast@gmail.com.
You can also follow us on social media platforms at The Governors Podcast. Let's connect.